And when they only have normal looking geckos and they say, hey, we don't know which ones are carrying and which ones aren't, so they're all 66% chance.
What's up, guys? In this video, we will cover part 2 of our lesson on genetics. We will talk about Punnett squares and how you can predict the genetic outcomes of your animals.
Okay, so now that we have discussed the vocabulary terms, we can begin to make our own combinations. In this Punnett square, the copies of genes that your dad has are going to be represented up top. Remember, every living organism has 2 copies of the genes before it splits apart and passes on to its children. So your dad is going to have 2 copies of the genes. Your mom is going to have 2 copies of her genes. And then within this square is going to be the outcome of what could possibly be passed on to you. I should first note that with a Punnett square, this is based off of an outcome. Block number 1 is 1 of 1. Block number 2 is 1 of 2. Block number 3 is 1 of 3. Block number 4 is 1 of 4. So think of it like a pizza pie has different portions and percentages that make up the whole pie. These 4 indicators are percentages or odds of the genes that will get expressed. It will be much easier to demonstrate as we go on. So just pay close attention and you will fully understand by the end of this video. So let's say your dad has brown eyes. Brown eyes is represented by a dominant capital B. Let's say he doesn't carry the blue eye gene. And let's say your mom is the same. Remember, these are the 2 genes that represent your parents. Your dad has brown eyes, so he has 1 brown eye gene, but he also has another brown eye gene, meaning that he got a brown eye gene from both of his parents. So he was doomed from the start. Unless the gene was mutated, he was having brown eyes no matter what. Your mom also has brown eyes. She received brown eyes from each of her parents. And watch what's going to happen to you. So each one of these locations, picture them dropping down into that box. And each one of these locations from the mom's side is going to move over sideways into their respective boxes. So it's a simple drag and drop. What happens when your dad's gene drops down into the box and your mom's gene moves over into the box? Well, if you take this capital B and bring it down, and you take this capital B and bring it over, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get 2 B's. And in the same way that your dad was a double B, you also now are a double B. But remember, genetics is all about odds and percentages. So this is only one of 4 possibilities of what can happen to you. You must combine the other possibilities to see what your percentages are of you turning out to have brown eyes. So let's continue this process. This B is going to drop down here, and this B is going to carry over here. And guess what? Again, you're going to have brown eyes according to this box. 2 out of 4 ain't bad, right? But we still got 2 more boxes to calculate. And you can't settle on your genetic odds until all 4 boxes are calculated. So let's do the same thing here. We're going to bring down your dad's gene all the way to the bottom box and your mom's gene all the way over to that first box. And again, 3 out of 4, brown eyes. The last box, bring the B down, bring your mom's B over, and what do you get? Brown eyes once again. So according to this genetic box, if your dad has 2 dominant brown eyes genes and your mom has 2 dominant brown eyes genes, what are the chances of the genes that are going to exist inside of you? Let's look at this as children. Let's look at this saying your mom and your dad have 4 children. This is child number 1. This is child number 2. This is child number 3. And this is child number 4. Out of 4 children, how many of these children will have dominant brown eyes? 100% of them. You will see here in a second, we're going to show where that will not be the case. But if your dad has 2 copies of the brown gene and your mom has 2 copies of the brown gene, 100% or 4 out of 4 children are going to have 2 copies of the brown eyes dominant gene. Okay, so we reset our board. Now let's look at if your parents are not only carrying the brown eyes gene. Let's say that your dad is carrying 1 copy of the blue eyes gene and your mom is carrying 1 copy of the blue eyes gene. Let's show what that will look like. Remember, brown eyes is a capital B dominant and blue eyes is a lowercase e recessive. You need 2 lowercase e's to show blue eyes. So even though this is your dad's genetic code for his eye color, which eye color is going to show in him? Think about that for a second. If you said brown, you would be 100% correct because the brown gene is dominant and only needs 1 copy to dominate over a recessive gene, such as the blue. Now let's match your mom up here. Let's say she has 1 copy of the dominant brown gene, as well as 1 copy of the recessive blue gene. Here's where it's really going to get fun and interesting. We're going to do the same example that we did before, but see what our outcome will be this time. So again, your dad's brown gene drops into here and your mom's gene carries over, and what do you get? You get capital B, capital B. But if you look at this location right here, this E is going to carry over into this box, and this B is going to carry over into this box, and what you are going to get is capital B, E. Now this also is a brown-eyed gene showing child, but it is carrying 1 copy of the recessive blue-eyed gene. As long as your dad or mom is carrying 1 copy of the recessive blue-eyed gene, there's a chance for that gene to break off into its own gamete, sperm or egg, during reproduction and to pass along to its children. So this child number 2 of these parents, is just like the parents. It has a dominant brown eye gene, meaning it has brown eyes, but it is also carrying the recessive blue eye gene. So let's keep going here. This B drops down, this E carries over. So far, one of the children has 2 copies of the brown eye gene, 1 from dad, 1 from mom. The other child has 1 copy of the brown eye gene, 1 copy of the blue eye gene, blue eyes from dad, and brown eyes from mom. The other child, the third child, has brown eyes from dad, blue eyes from mom. But here's where it gets really cool. What is going to happen to this 4th child? If you bring this E over and bring this E down, you're stuck with 2 E's. So what does that mean? Remember, recessive traits need 2 copies to show their genetic display. So out of 4 children, 1 of their children are going to have blue eyes. Statistically. Again, all 4 of these boxes are based on statistics. They are not guarantees. You could have, based on this pairing, you could have 4 out of 4 children could have this combination. But it is statistically against the odds to do that. Why? Because when we did our little Punnett square here, we see that only 1 out of the 4 children should have capital B, capital B. 2 out of the 4 children should have capital B, lowercase e, and 1 out of the 4 children should have lowercase e, creating a blue eyes child. And again, these are just probabilities. So this box can multiply on. What if your parents had 8 children? The odds are still the same. So think of it as percentages. Each of these would just double. It would be 2 out of the 8 would contain this, capital B, capital B. 4 out of the 8 would contain capital B, lowercase e. And 2 out of the 8 would contain lowercase e, lowercase e. So the odds just double. It's just multiplication. So it's easier to think of it in percentages. 1 out of 4 is 25%. 25% of your parents' children will have capital B, capital B. What happens if you take 1 out of 4 plus 1 out of 4? You get 2 out of 4, which is also 1/2. So see, half of the children here have capital B, lowercase e. Half is 50%. So you can also say 50% of my parents' children are going to have capital B, lowercase e. And then what is this last box? Also 1 out of 4. 25% of my parents' children will have lowercase e, and will have blue eyes. Okay, so now the moment you've all been waiting for, some leopard gecko examples. So just like dominant and recessive traits in human beings, there's both dominant and recessive traits in reptile genetics. So let's take a look at some examples here. When you have a normal leopard gecko, the genes that pair up with the other parent's genes, let's just call that set of genes normal. Once there starts to be alterations to those genes, or mutations or genetic differences, now we're going to start calling certain genes to associate with their genetic difference, how they make the animal look different. So within leopard geckos, there is a snow gene, a super snow gene, and an albino gene. So the good thing about these 4 genes that I picked out here is it will give us the overall display of everything you need to know about leopard gecko genetics. So let's begin with some examples. Based on the pattern of an animal, let's say we have one male leopard gecko that is completely normal. The dad is completely normal. He has no mutations, no anything. And let's say the mom is completely normal. She has no mutations, no anything. Do you think there's any chance that the children can have mutations according to our statistical calculator of the Punnett square? So remember, the Punnett square is our statistical calculator. It's not the end-all be-all, but it is a 99% assurity. You know, sometimes the odds are in your favor, sometimes the odds are not in your favor. Nevertheless, they are odds. So let's look at this. This pairing, this is one child, this is another child, this is the third child, and the fourth child. Do you see any genetic percentages or any genetic differences between all 4 of these children? No, there is no genetic difference between all 4 of these children. If you take a completely normal leopard gecko and breed it with a completely normal leopard gecko, you are going to have all normal leopard geckos. Okay, so I reset the board here. Let's change things up a little bit. Let's say we have a snow leopard gecko and we breed it with a snow leopard gecko. What are the offspring going to be? Snow is an incomplete dominant trait in leopard geckos. That means that if you have one copy of the gene and you don't have another copy of the gene, the one copy you have is going to blend with the normal or wild or regular type leopard gecko. So that is going to be represented by snow for big S and N for normal. And remember, these two are going to blend together to create a snow-looking gecko. If you haven't seen my video on leopard gecko morphs, there's plenty of showings of a snow leopard gecko in there. This is the DNA of a snow leopard gecko. This is what it looks like on the inside. Now let's say the mom is also a snow leopard gecko. So here we have a regular snow and a regular snow. These 2 traits are fused together in the parent to make it look different. And these 2 traits are fused together in the parent to make it look different. Let's drop everything down into its respective categories and see what we get. So child number 1 is actually going to be something pretty cool. It's going to be big S, big S. So in leopard gecko genetics, whenever you have a incomplete dominant trait, that means that the full expression of that trait will be complete when you have 2 copies. So again, it's not a recessive trait because recessive genes don't show. It doesn't make any difference when you have one copy of the gene. But because with this trait, with the snow trait, you take a snow gecko, you breed it with a normal leopard gecko, you're going to get a blend of the two traits. That is incomplete dominance. Now, if you take the snow gene and it combines with another snow gene, now the dominance is complete and it's in its fully expressive form, called a super snow. And if you haven't seen a super snow, check out my last two videos on leopard gecko morphs. You will see plenty of shots of super snow in those videos. Let's drop down the regular categories. I'm going to put the snow gene first, just to be aesthetically pleasing across the board. And let's keep going here. All right. Now remember, Leopard Gecko Genetics is all about odds and statistics. This parent bred with this parent and created this percentage of offspring. Now, leopard geckos will typically have anywhere between 6 to 10 babies per year. So this is a percentage. So what is 50% of 10 babies? 5 geckos. What is 50% of 8 babies? 4 geckos. So when we're talking about percentages down here, just take whatever percentage you get and correlate it with the amount of babies you have, and you can see how close to the statistical odds you are that breeding season for your offspring. So statistically, this offspring from this dad and this mom should have 1 super snow, 2 regular snows, and guess what? 1 normal. These are the odds. These are the combinations. This is how the genetics get passed down, and this is how you can calculate what to expect out of every breeding season. Let's take one more example before moving on. The albino trait. The albino trait in leopard geckos is one of the recessive traits, one of the more popular recessive traits in leopard geckos. It is represented by lowercase a, lowercase a. So let's say you have a dad leopard gecko that is an albino. This is what his inside genetics are going to look like. He received this copy from his dad, this copy from his mom, and because albinism is a recessive gene, he has 2 of them. Now he is showing the albino trait. And again, if you don't know what albino trait is, check out my last 3 videos on leopard gecko morphs and you will see albinos in those videos. Let's say the mom is also an albino. What percentage of the children or the offspring do you think will be albino? Let's do it. Do our Punnett square. Carry it over, boom. Carry it over, boom. Carry it over, boom. Carry it over, boom. 4 out of 4 children will be 100% albino in an albino to albino pairing. One more quick one because I want to make sure you really got this before we move on. Let's take a dad that is normal, but carrying 1 of the albino genes, and let's take a mom that is normal and carrying 1 of the albino genes. In the industry, this is called het for albino, heterozygous for albino. Do you see where those 2 words came from? So when you're shopping around for leopard geckos and you see, I have a leopard gecko that's het albino, what does that mean? That means that it is not showing the albinism trait because albinism is recessive, but it is carrying the albino gene because it got passed on from the parents. And what's the good thing about a het is that you can breed it to another het and get an expressive. You can get the expression that you are looking for of albinism. So I want to show that to you here. So let's do our Punnett square for our het albino times het albino. Carry over all the letters. All right, percentages again. If you take a het albino dad and you breed it to a het albino mom, what percentage of the babies will be actually albino? I will let you do the math. So we have 1 baby completely normal, another baby carrying the gene, a 3rd baby carrying the gene, and guess what? Our fourth little baby here is an actual expressive albino. So a het to a het will produce 25% of the recessive gene trait that you are looking for. Het albino to het albino will produce 25% actual albinos, 50%, because see there's 2 out of 4 here, 50% het albinos, and 25% non-albino. Here's a pro tip. I'm going to give you a pro tip for breeding right here. In the leopard gecko industry, you will oftentimes see that something is 66% heterozygous for albinism or for any other recessive trait. What in the world does that mean? How do you be 66% heterozygous for something, and how do you calculate that? It's all based on the Punnett square. So how many of these babies is normal? 1 out of 4. How many is het? 2 out of 4. How many is actual albino? 1 out of 4. In the leopard gecko industry, whenever the parents are het and they produce a visually displaying animal, that means that the breeder has proven out that, hey, even though I can't see the albinism in the parents, I know they're carrying the gene. And when they sell their offspring to you, this one is going to be obvious. The albino one's going to be obvious. But these ones that are carrying the gene, but they don't show the traits of the gene, those ones are completely impossible to tell the difference between this baby and this baby. A normal baby not carrying the gene looks exactly the same as a normal baby carrying the gene. So that's why they say it is 66% chance when you buy this gecko that it is het. Because they forget about this. They take this out of the equation because that's the one that's obvious. And now your odds are slimmed down to 2 out of 3. And 2 out of 3 of these babies are going to be carriers for the albino gene. Do you see that? This one does not carry it. This one carries it. This one carries it. Forget about this fourth one. We know that carries it because it's an expression of it. So breeders take that genetic percentage out of the equation to begin with. And when they only have normal looking geckos and they say, hey, we don't know which ones are carrying and which ones aren't, so they're all 66% chance. Why are they all 66% chance? Because statistically, 2 out of 3 of these normal looking babies should be carrying the gene. You might not hit the odds. You might pay extra. Sometimes you might pay like $100 extra for a 66% chance of hitting these odds right here. And then you breed that gecko later on and it's not carrying the gene. But that is the chance that you take in the reptile hobby industry. Here's how you get 100% heterozygous children. So we know what 66% is now. How do I get 100%? How do I know for sure that even though this gecko is not showing the trait, it has the heterozygous albinism trait inside of its DNA? You get a picture of the parents. You trust the breeder, and here's what happens. Let's say the dad is albino. Let's say the mom is completely normal. Can I get a gecko that is carrying the albinism trait, and what are my chances? Letters carry over. Oh, and what do we have when all the letters carry over? We have 4 out of 4 children, or 100% of the children are carrying the gene as long as one of the parents is a visually displaying parent of that characteristic. Here we have an albino dad showing the albinism gene because he has 2 copies of it. And here we have a normal mom not carrying the albino gene, not showing the albino gene, completely normal. But their babies are not going to be completely normal. All 4 of their babies are going to be carriers of the albino gene.